What's everybody? This is the Storm Rider, riding the storm with you. We're going to talk today about a student of mine who I'll call Anastasia, and that's not her real name. I'll be protecting the real identities of everyone involved in the story. And this was a student of mine who was a little girl who I saw in classes for about 4 years, starting when she was in the first grade. She was an elementary school student who I worked with back then when I was a younger teacher in the States, in a Massachusetts suburb. I'm not going to provide too many details about where I taught and when, because I want to keep everything as anonymous as possible. Fake names are very important. When I tell stories, I protect the identity of the students and staff involved by changing the names. I write about Anastasia, and I talk about Anastasia today because she was a student of mine who was very near and dear to my heart. This is another story of winning over a student and losing them because other grown-ups interfered or intervened. Maybe they intervened to humble me. Maybe they intervened to punish me and derailed a student's education in the process. Her story is an interesting one. It is a story of education gone wrong, or is it a story of a simple misuse of the tools of education? You be the judge. When I worked at this elementary school in the suburbs, the kids really liked me. I was imaginative, creative, well prepared, and I had procedures that gamified cleanup and setup. My classroom was really accessible, functional, and it freed the path for us to have lots of fun. So what I'm saying here is that I was a really fun teacher. My lessons were really fun, and my students often said that my class was their favorite. That's not unusual for the elementary school art teacher. But I also got students to clean up really fast and set up really fast so that we could maximize the learning time. So I made my class really user-friendly for children, and I organized the time really well. I had about 500 students in a given school year because I was the art teacher. I'd see each class once a week for 45 minutes, and there were 25 separate classes. Lots of these kids were similar to one another, and some of their faces just blended together, to be honest. There were a few well-behaved little blonde white girls whose names I would always mix up. The kids who stood out the most were always the interesting ones, and those were the ones I'd get warnings about before I had the chance to even meet them. Nowadays, we call them neurodivergent. We used to call them bad or troubled, and then we called them different or learning disabled, and then we called them special, and then we called them differentiated, and then we said they had a special education plan, and that's where we were at in education at that time. You know how it goes. In this field, there are terms always evolving. The terms are always evolving, and the kids are always the same. As a teacher, the ones who think differently are the most interesting ones. Those are your white whales, your holy grails, your El Dorado, and your Atlantis. If you could win them over, it would prove your talent as a teacher once and for all. Regardless of whatever rumors were swirling around my reputation or what mental health recovery issues I was taking on, I knew that if I was good with the kids, everybody on staff would know that I was good with the kids. By the way, I was in the program, and I knew other sex addicts anonymously who were also teachers. So I didn't think it was weird that I was a teacher. I didn't think sex addicts can't be teachers at all. I knew lots of teachers and even administrators, men and women, who happened to be in the program as well. So I thought nothing of it by that time, because I knew that addiction is a normal experience and under the circumstances of the world we live in. After all, something can't literally be everywhere without people being addicted to it somewhere. Anyways, so this is the story of Anastasia, another one of my frequent flyers, and she was an incredibly bright little girl. I really liked Anastasia, and I made no secret of it. That is what you do when you have a quote unquote bad kid who needs to restore trust in their teachers. You invest on the front end a lot of trust and a lot of energy in them so that they feel welcome. That way, when things start to get tough and they start to unravel a little bit or get stressed out, you see more good behavior than bad behavior from them. Of course, I wasn't physically affectionate. That would be absurd. There's no reason for that. And that should go without saying. It's not appropriate or necessary. I didn't need to be. I was friendly. I was nice. I was creative in how I redirected behavior um, that came close to the line of becoming bad behavior. And I kept her focus on doing stuff and making stuff so she didn't have time to think about disruptions. Over time, I displayed a sense of welcomeness and pride toward her in my conduct, and I really was proud of her. I would be approving of harmless mistakes and encouraging her to keep trying. When needed, I redirected her gently. I showed her patience and wisdoms in my dealings with her that had been modeled for me to follow during my master's program at Tufts University, and I smiled a lot when she was around. Let me explain a little bit about her background. Anastasia was an orphan from Russia who was adopted by a very wealthy and affluent WASP couple that saw Anastasia as the missing piece to heal their strained relationship. WASP, by the way, is an acronym, WASP, and it means White Anglo-Saxon Protestants. It's a slang that's used a lot in the United States. Anastasia was meant to bring them closer together, but no one told Anastasia that. By the time she entered my class, both parents spent little time with her. They had high-flying, high-paying jobs which took them out of Massachusetts for most of the time. And I think that Anastasia's adopted mother ended up hiring the nanny to take care of her full-time, while mom was on business trips and dad was wherever he was. So that was Anastasia's life. She had been an orphan. Then she was ripped from Mother Russia and plopped in a country she barely knew, hearing a language she didn't speak, in a big house with two adults who were little more than strangers to her. Oh yeah, and then she had a Caribbean nanny as her main caregiver. So Anastasia's first days of my class were during her first grade year. By that time, she had been diagnosed with something called ODD, Oppositional Defiant Disorder. Now, what is ODD, you might ask? Well, I'll tell you. It's a bunch of nonsense. Trust me. There's actually no such thing as ODD. However, it's a term created to psychologize undesirable behaviors where a child has trouble with authority. If a child doesn't like being told what to do, unless they really trust the person who's telling them and they understand, and they don't like following orders blindly, that child might be classified with what they call ODD. When someone cannot accept authority on a taken for granted basis, especially as a child, they will be diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. Now, what does that sound like? That sounds like ADD, and in ADD, there is a real disorder where people have difficulty concentrating. I've lived ADD. I know ADD. I have ADD, and ADD is real. It is not acceptable to model other disorders or other undesirables, other things you don't like, after ADD. When ADD is real and there are real ways to address it, there are ways to calm the mind and there are ways to improve focus. As we already know, ADD is a concept whereby it's difficult to hold focus on one thing. But what situations are there where it's not difficult for those children? Students with ADD have no trouble watching a TV show for 30 minutes or becoming engrossed in a good movie. Why? Because film and TV are naturally dynamic, and dynamic situations are not a problem for people with ADD. But very static situations are naturally uncomfortable for them. People with the fake disorder of ODD do have problems with authority in certain situations and contexts, not across the board. So, Anastasia had one of these behavior plans where it's called a 504 plan. And I always remember it because it sounds like Levi's 501 jeans. For people with a 504 plan, the law actually gives them certain protections to keep them in the classroom and to make sure they remain in the classroom. So that's why it's ironic. The things I'm going to tell you about, ironically, go against the behavior plan and the protections that the student is supposed to be given. When you have a behavior plan, okay, a 504 plan, it's a state-recognized, legally binding set of protocols ensuring that the student stays in the classroom. That's the whole point of a behavior plan. But so often, regardless of the actual plans and the actual language in the plans, students are removed from class. And this is the type of thing in this story I'm trying to avoid. When students are removed, they're often removed by unskilled or underskilled employees who don't really know how to do their job. They're not good at what they do, or they don't understand child psychology, human psychology, and human behavior as well as teachers do. I'm going to talk about this another time, but teachers have a really unique applied psychology understanding of children's behavior, whereas most of these people coming in have 1 or 2 years of experience, a whole lot of theory, and a lot of those theories are generated but untested and are a little bit devoid of reality. Okay? All right. I know how to keep students with ODD in the classroom, with the quote-unquote ODD. And I was dealing with quote-unquote professionals who don't know how to keep them in and didn't want to learn from me. They didn't know how to redirect or reorganize or communicate with the students without shutting down and using force. These are the adults. The adults are the ones shutting down and using force. Now, let's get back to the story. When I started having Anastasia in my class, in my classes, I was that fun teacher. I'm the teacher who sees students. I'm the teacher who knows who they are, what they're about. You can tell me that a student has ODD, and I'll say, yeah, I know what you mean to say. You mean to say that if you're not clever in how you manage the student and how you integrate them, then there are going to be problems. It was obvious that Anastasia was a frequent flyer. She came in with those ghost eyes, looking both scared and angry at the same time. It was fight or flight from the beginning. A new teacher, a new adult, a new threat for her. For this reason, I knew that kindness and warmth had to start flowing right away. A frequent flyer means you cannot deal with her the way you reprimand a regular student, because she will fly off the handle. With a typical child, when they're being an ass or they're being mean to somebody, you can react logically and squash the behavior. Now, the interesting thing about Anastasia's story is that the idea of safety is going to be evoked against her. So things were going well in Anastasia's class because I was doing my thing. I was being warm and friendly, and when she needed redirection, it was done gently and carefully. And I never had any really tough outbursts happen that first year, thankfully. She began to integrate herself into the class, and that first year went fine. Second year was fine most of the year. And then we got this paraprofessional, or maybe she was a social worker. And this individual is the main focus of my ire in the story. Ire, by the way, means anger. Anastasia had become a valuable member of the classroom community by this time. She was helpful. She was cooperative. Her unique insights were welcomed and rewarded in the classroom. She may have at times overreacted or grabbed a student's hand during class, but it was very easy to de-escalate, talk her down, and to move on. And most of the time, she was creative, engaged, participatory, and non-disruptive without any incidents. That is all you want from a student with fake ODD, but very real problems with authority in group settings. If you can get a kid to not pick on her classmates and to learn something every time, then that is them being amazing. In other words, if you can get a student to just get along reasonably well with the other students in the room and do her work and try her best, that is a sign of success. So, for a student with authority issues to feel safe in the classroom and not threatened by authority is indeed a miracle, or at least the orchestrations of a skilled teacher playing a very delicate game of 3D chess. The fact that she learns stuff, the fact that she participates, the fact that she does her part, and finally, the fact that she very simply refrains from antagonizing others is a triumphant success that we should all be celebrating. As I said before, Anastasia grew up in an orphanage in Russia and at 5 years old was flown halfway around the world, excuse me. She probably didn't know what was happening to her in the time. It was probably extremely scary for her. And then Anastasia finds herself in a house with strangers, and eventually found herself being raised by more or less a complete stranger who didn't even look like her. So after a while, she probably wasn't even sure who he was. She was. Did she know she was Russian? No. Did she know who her real mother was or her real father was? Probably not. That's a lot for a child. So when your teacher magically persuades a child like that not to terrorize the rest of the classroom community, you feel like the best teacher in the world. And you really are. The fact that normalcy has been achieved is a tremendous achievement for a student like this. To get a student like this to conform to newly created conditions is truly unbelievable. So if you're doing that right now, if you're making a classroom feel like home for a student who's being disruptive, I want to give a shout out to you and say you're doing a great job and you really are a miracle worker. Keep it up. Now, here's where everything started to change. One day, something really simple and very normal happened. And it should seem weird that the adult with her reacted so forcefully. Anastasia came in the classroom with the adult, the social worker, and sat down. Donna was the new social worker working with Anastasia one-on-one. And we sat down in the meeting area. I had the students all sit down in this little meeting area. By this time, Anastasia was in the second grade and it was the middle of the year. I had the students sit down in a tiny little meeting area. Not tiny. It was a pretty big meeting area, big enough for everybody. And it was like this cool little arena. All right, here's the story about the meeting area. The visual arts lead administrator at the time, who was also a teacher at the high school, had a set of about 6 picnic benches in his backyard that he didn't need anymore. So he loaded all 6 of them up in his pickup truck and brought them over to my classroom before the school year started. He was really, really great that way. He was really one of the nicest guys and most welcoming. He was one of these old-fashioned types where my job interview with him was over cheeseburgers at a local restaurant. I kind of like that. So now my classroom had 6 benches, forming 2 rows of semicircles. Right wing, middle wing, left wing, right wing, middle, and left wing, right? It was like a Greek amphitheater for children. Inside the art classroom and studio. There was something magical about that classroom, and I never had a room like that again. It was so large that you could have different sections and modulate the room in different ways. On the day in question, Anastasia came in with a new social worker named Donna, and I started teaching and doing my thing. While I was teaching, a child who was sitting in front of Anastasia put an arm behind her, and for whatever reason, Anastasia grabbed the other arm, the other girl's arm. This was in violation of the rules. Keep your hands to yourself. Yeah. But grabbing the arm was all that happened. We could have said, hey, Anna, let go of her arm, and everything would be fine. But instead, the adult in the room, who happened to be poorly skilled, said, okay, that's it. You grabbed her arm. All right. You're out of class. Come with me. We're leaving. And I'm thinking, who the heck does this person think she is? Just taking Anastasia out of class because she grabbed someone's arm. I'm the teacher. It's my call, and I decide when people have gone too far. I decide when there's danger. I'm trained. I know when there's danger. I know where to draw the line. I mean, we're talking about grabbing her wrist. A wrist is not a black eye. A wrist is not a broken bone. Uh, you can just let go of the wrist, unhand the student, and say you're sorry, and we'll move on. If nothing else happens, then nothing else happens, and we're good. The social worker overreacted crazily, and I'm going to tell you later on how this person got themselves fired. So, with her overreacting like crazy, I was livid too. I was so furious that I actually stopped teaching and went after them. I found them right outside my door in the hallway, and I said, "Excuse me, what you did here, that can never happen again." I got that line, "What you did here that can never happen again," from a friend of mine who was really my principal at another school in Dorchester before I went and did a degree at Tufts. Back then, I sucked at teaching. And I was late to school one day because I went to use the bathroom at a McDonald's on my way to school, and I left my tablet on the floor in the bathroom, and the tablet got stolen before I forgot about the bathroom. So I used to get such butterflies before school in the morning. By the way, butterflies in my stomach. I never found the tablet, and I got to school late, and I explained why. And my principal was like, "Well, what you just did, that can never happen again." And I never forgot that because I felt like such a child being reprimanded myself. And I was like, well, I'm so selfish. My $1,600 laptop just got stolen and I have to swallow it and I got to be here on time. That's life. So that phrase was in my vocabulary. What you just did, that can never happen again. Sometimes in America you forget you're not white. Sometimes you just think, I'm American, she's American, we're both American, so I'll just say what I need to say. So I said, what you just did here, that can never happen again. And believe it or not, she didn't take it well. Yes, you can't take students out of class, is what I'm saying. And she says back, well, actually, if there's a safety issue, I can. And the social worker referenced a previous incident where another student's safety was in question, where Anastasia supposedly attacked that student or grabbed that student or what have you. It was certainly something that could have been deemed unsafe, but I don't remember what it was. It's totally okay to acknowledge that some things are unsafe. You can't push a child. You can't shove a child. You can't do certain things. But we also need to acknowledge that kicking a child out of class is not a form of de-escalation. You need to engage in de-escalation with a student who has so-called ODD, or in other words, very real problems with authority that need to be kept in focus and dealt with first, before you go straight to the nuclear option that is removal from class. So Donna, the social worker, decided on her own, without consulting me, to kick the child out of class and take her with her to her office or some other nonsense to give her a lecture about grabbing people. I know how smart, crafty, intelligent teachers work because I've watched them manage those situations, and they don't go right to the strongest extreme. You would think that if you want to set someone straight or get them in line, you need to go tough from the beginning. But that doesn't really work, and it's not true. You need to go wherever they don't expect you to go. Gentleness is always the first response from me, and then it can be followed by firmness. And gentleness is something that those types of children, the frequent flyers, are not expecting and not accustomed to. For me, it's a matter of allowing them the chance to reconsider while letting them know that I'm watching what's happening. Here's what we should have done. We should have said, Anna, keep your hands to yourself. You can let go. Is she bothering you? Are you bothering her? Is everyone okay? Okay, that's fine. Let's keep going. I was stunned that she ripped the child out of class. In the aftermath of this, Donna started doing more and more heavy-handed discipline in the middle of my class. She engaged in more and more extreme interventions rather than de-escalations, or harsher and harsher reactions to Anna's behavior. What did Anna do? Well, of course, she kept acting out and stopped learning. She made a turn for the worse. Anastasia really started to do bad at school, but our relationship was still pretty good. She knew that I liked her, and she knew that I cared about her, and I wanted her in the classroom. Or else, why would I have objected to her being distracted? The museum. There was this event that same year where I organized a museum exhibition for the fifth grade artists. I organized a very upbeat and crafty and fun project called Mystical Creatures and Mythical Beings. It was a collaborative project where each table of 4 or 5 students put together a monster of sorts. Using visual textures drawn from real animals, students drew and colored in the different monsters. Students cut out the body parts and assembled them into magnificent monsters, and then we backed them on presentation board for display. There was a huge exhibition in the Sphinx Museum in Massachusetts. By the way, this is not a real museum. Name change, fake name, the Sphinx Museum. It wasn't a real exhibition, but it was a brief community outreach exhibition where we got to put the monsters up on easels and have the kids and their parents come and celebrate them. My curriculum was all about making kids feel like they were real artists. So we had an opening reception for fifth grade students at a real museum. This gave all the other students in all the other grades something to look forward to. Never say I don't help students build confidence, because I'm all about using my shamanic powers and my skills of trickery to help students believe in themselves and nothing less. The thing is that real artists have exhibits in museums. So why not little artists? And I'm sorry, but real artists don't have some asshat who isn't even paying attention to what's going on yank them out of the art studio for grabbing someone else's wrist. And real artists have opening receptions. And Anastasia came and she saw what happened and she saw how I hosted the reception, and she gave me a big hug in front of her mother. It was one of those cling for dear life hugs that Anastasia would give because, like I said, she was a very emotional kid. I met her mom and chatted with her a bit, and Anastasia, gave me a big hug while I was doing that. And the thing you have to understand is about this kid is like, if you're in the institution or the public school, you're going to state that she has oppositional problems, defiance problems, that she has problems with authority. Whereas when you really get through all of that structure, and you get to the core of who she is, you just realize that the student is extremely emotional, which makes sense for a student who's traumatized by her early childhood experiences. Her love and hate were always at 11. So either you're going to get the love from her at 11, the appreciation and excitement and enthusiasm, or you're going to get the hate, which is going to come out with her breaking stuff and hitting people. What would you rather have as a teacher? Would you rather be cussed out by a second grader, or would you rather be overwhelmed with love and appreciation? I'd rather the kids like me, frankly. I'd rather the most dangerous and potentially destructive kids like me rather than not. I also want them to learn, and I'm glad they're happy. Because if they're not going to learn it, because if they don't like me, they're not going to learn anything. And they'll just disrupt the other children from learning. But if they enjoy the classroom, they don't have to actually personally like me on a personal level. They like me as a teacher. They like me as the person who runs the room. Anyways, I'm going on and on about this. You get the idea. Let's sum it up by saying when you provide meaningful educational experiences for children and you arrange things in a way that's easy and facilitates, the children will like you. The oppositional children will like you. The non-oppositional children will like you. Everybody will like you. You know, the saddest thing is that the classroom was the one place where I felt people liked me. At home, I was having a lot of problems in my relationships. And my colleagues and staff weren't really my biggest fans. Maybe somewhere, but not all of them. As some were really cool, but not all of them. Middle-aged white women are not one of my core demographics, or not the group that I'm easiest. I wasn't It wasn't easiest for me to understand them. Let's put it that way. I mean, maybe they are now because I'm older. I'm middle aged also. As a matter of fact, I think I do pretty well with that demographic now. But back then, I was 26 or 7. And yeah, that was a different story. At that time, I was kind of an ass in my private life also. But I was a good teacher. Anyways, it was clear to Anastasia's mom that she really liked me. And she started to realize that maybe the social worker was the problem and not me. At school, Anastasia had stopped showing up to class on time. This is by the time she's in third grade, I think. The social worker's responsibility, and it was definitely intentional. It was the social worker's responsibility to get her into class on time. And it was definitely intentional because everybody knows that the first 5 or 10 minutes of my class are the part that I teach what the lesson is all about. If you miss the meeting in the beginning of class, and you come 10 minutes late, you can't say to me, oh yeah, the 10-minute mini lesson that you just performed for all students, could you please do that again for this student? No, it doesn't work that way, and education never works that way. The way it works is I teach everybody, I do a full mini lesson, and then everybody goes to work. They're not on autopilot. They need assistance. They're only children. And no, I cannot stop doing my job to reteach the thing just one-on-one to one child. That year, Anna's class was first thing in the morning. Supposedly, Anastasia would come into school and she would take too long to put away her bags, so she'd be 10 minutes late to my class. 10 minutes exactly. She was starting to fall apart and hate school. And I could see it because she frankly really hated that woman. And they were just like, what do we do? And I'm like, well, it's kind of freaking hard to explain because it's a whole thing and you missed it. And then they were like, well, can we just take some paper and draw? So one of the paras would just come in and make her sit down at the table and tell her, draw, just draw, just draw, just do what they're doing, do what the other students are doing. The problem is there's no intelligence behind that. Anastasia knows that she missed the little meaning at the beginning of class where the meaning behind the lesson is explained. Even at 8 years old, she knows how important the introduction is to a lesson. So I've never understood why they wanted to teach Anna to put her bags away as if she was stupid. Who cares how she puts her bags away? She's in school to learn, not become obedient, which will never happen anyway because, as we all agree, she has that quote-unquote ODD. Why does she have to put her bags away in some special way? And then she has to what? Redo it if she doesn't do it right? You're making a big fuss out of nothing because you're prioritizing meaningless behavior over actual learning. Do me a favor and prioritize learning, and then behaviors and procedures will fall into place. And by the way, this is especially true for those frequent flyers. I frankly needed Donna, the social worker, to just get students to class on time. And when she couldn't do that, she blamed Anna. It's crazy to me that a social worker like Donna could get away with such sabotage. People might not have caught her incompetence for what it was, but if it wasn't for the added dimension of foul play that took place and was later discovered. This incompetence, blamed on Anna, got so bad that we had to have a meeting about it. And the principal was Dr. Polanski, a middle-aged woman who I really respected and admired. Donna, the social worker, and the special education teacher or specialist was another woman. They were both at that meeting together. And they had to back each other up because, let's face it, they worked together closely and they needed to support each other. So I was the only guy on the teaching staff, and I was the art teacher. So it was me on one side, the two special education department members, the social worker and the teacher, on the other side. And The principal, Dr. Polanski, was mediating. I spoke for myself, saying that the beginning of class is really important because that's where the instruction really happens. Students are oriented to the learning objectives and know what to expect. And then, from the side of the special education department, they said, we're just really having a lot of trouble bringing her to class on time. Okay, how's that my fault? How's that my problem? The principal mediated. She defended my point of view and then the point of view of the other team. She defended the value of my time, but also the expertise of the two women sitting opposite me. One of the ideas brought to me was the question, is it possible for you to be flexible with the time? And is it possible for you to adapt to the situation? These people and a special ed team are having trouble. So maybe you can be more flexible. I said, it's very important for me to adapt. It's very important for me to differentiate instruction and adapt to Anastasia's situation. There are many adaptations I can put into place for someone who has differentiated learning needs. Every learning disability with a 504 plan is a known disability with known adaptations that are expected by law. They're specific and they are enumerated. If someone has attention deficit disorder, I'm going to use visuals and make my presentation more dynamic to hold their interest. If someone has a hearing disability, we're going to use hearing aids and also a lot of visual information to compensate. Every known disability has a specific intervention which addresses it. And being late, I said, isn't really a disability because there's no known intervention or compensation for just being late. How do you differentiate your instruction for non-attendance or absence? You can't. With all the known learning disabilities and neurodivergencies, being late is just not one of them. I floored the room with this response. It gave everyone pause. And unfortunately, I kept talking. There's nothing that says you're supposed to let it go if they're late. You know what I mean? You're setting up students for failure, and it doesn't make sense for them to even come if they're going to miss the most important part of the meeting. So, if the student's going to come and not learn anything and leave frustrated, why even put them through this experience? My principal was kind of taken aback. I hoped it was because I made a good point and not because of my arrogance or intractable attitude. Nothing made sense in terms of what the adults were doing. If you heard me before, the thing I hate most is when everything is going well and then a grown-up decides they're going to screw up a child's education or their trajectory by sabotaging both their learning and the social-emotional feeling of being connected in order to teach that arrogant Arab teacher a lesson on how dare they disrupt the status quo with their newfangled ideas. Okay, so that's how we got a little phone call that changed everything. The next week, I got a call in my classroom after school. And it was Anastasia's mom who said, I saw you with Anna at the museum, and it's obvious she really likes you, and she thinks you're great. And I said, I like her too. In fact, it's no secret that I'm quite fond of Anna. I think she's an amazing kid. The word fond means that you like somebody. And it's a good word to use in a diplomatic setting because it just means you care about them. You can like a student, you can care about a student, and you can say that. I'm really fond of that student, and everyone will know what you mean. When you teach, you'll have students that you feel like you could adopt, or ones that you feel are really special without knowing it. Those students single-handedly reward you for all your efforts because you get really emotionally attached when you see the change in them. The greater the change, the more emotionally attached to the teaching experience you will be. If someone goes from being the so-called bad student in the class to the top of the class or one of the leaders, you're going to feel like there's something really special about that student. And so this was a student who I cared deeply about, and it was obvious in my tone, even on the phone. And then Anna's mother says, because I was told that you didn't want her to come to class. Now that was twisting my words. And I said, no, I want her to come to class. I just want her to come on time. She needs to come on time because that's when we have all the important instructions and all the meetings so that students know what to expect and what to do. She cannot be successful if she does not come to the beginning of the class. Why would we make her come to class in order to fail? Why would we set her up to fail? That is the philosophical question that I was posing. I said, thank you very much. She said to me, thank you very much for telling me that. I was told something different. And I told her, thank you for calling me. I'm sorry for the confusion. Anna's mother understood what I was saying, so I said my goodbyes, and I apologized for the confusion, of course. I went down to the main office, and I relayed my conversation faithfully to the school principal. And the next week, at the staff meeting, Donna was gone. And I said, what happened to Donna? And staff or other teachers in the room said, oh, she had to be let go for an administrative reason. What happened? What did she do? No one wanted to answer me. You can ask Dr. Polanski if you want. What had actually happened was that this person lied to Anna's mom to make me look bad. No one explained it to me, and it took me the whole summer to figure out what the rest of the staff already knew. In the meeting, it hadn't dawned on me that I was part of her firing. Eventually, I did realize, oh, she must have lied to Anna's mom about the reason Anna couldn't be in art class. It's great to see that they backed me up on this one. God knows that because of my ex's ex, there were people out there in the community saying that I was a threat to children, a monster, or some dirty little combination of Cronus, from Greek mythology, and the Pied Piper from the town of Hamlet. While I might not have been perfect in my personal life, at school I was near impeccable. Anyways, so Donna got fired for lying about me and basically depriving Anastasia of her education in the name of trying to make me look bad or mess with me. By the 4th grade, the damage was done, though. If I can be perfectly honest, especially as far as my art class was concerned. People came late, the new paraprofessional wouldn't listen to me, and would try to redirect Anna or give her feedback on her art, and the new paraprofessional would complain that I was being rude or something like that. The new paraprofessional made it look like I was criticizing Anna for her behavior when I was commenting on her artwork. I'm talking about the curriculum, not the behavior, and it's okay to do that out in the open. I was just addressing things about her way of designing, not her way of behaving. And they were all like, you should tell me and not her. You tell me and I'll tell her. That's just not how it works when it comes to curriculum. You can address curriculum directly and you don't have to worry about that turning into bad behavior. So with Anna, the damage was really done, and her confidence was damaged irreversibly. To me, this was a huge tragedy. And the moral of the story is that even if you do everything right in education and you become an inspiring classroom leader, some ass will probably come along and try to tear up your craft paper and break all your scissors. They might be a little bit jealous of you, or they might be petty, and they might suck at their job. And the way they hide that fact that they suck at their job is by making you look bad. And that's just how some people go through life. There are people who go through life in this education, they don't value education. There are people who work in schools and they don't value schools. They value navigating the political environment rather than empowering the educational environment. I don't know. All right. I don't know what the answer is to all this, so I'm sorry to bring that to you. I wish I had a moral of the story, or I wish I had a solution. I'd probably still be a classroom teacher if I knew the answer. I did have a meeting with my spiritual leader at the time, or my mentor, and he said, you're very concerned about the wellness and the experience of the student, but you're not as concerned about the wellness and the experience of the paraprofessional or the social worker and making them feel welcome. Well, I didn't I didn't account for having to teach them the rules of learning. That's what someone said to me. So you can think about that and say, well, maybe I missed the boat on that, seeing them as one of the students in the classroom or something. I don't know. What are you going to do? I lost a desire to be a classroom teacher, not all at once, but over time, with incidents like those repeating over and over again. I didn't lose the desire to talk about my experiences. In fact, that's one of the things I enjoy the most nowadays. To a certain extent, I was someone who felt like I was making a sacrifice and thought, hey, I am sacrificing my own personal time in the studio and my options to be an art teacher. But I'm also very committed to excellence and refining the craft of cultivating the student mind. Surely the community will appreciate my sacrifice. In the years I taught there, I have lots of stories of students who changed for the better. Parents who came to me and said things like, you know, my son is drawing again because of you, because of the environment that you created. She meant that he'd lost it and found it again because of the feeling he felt in my classroom. Now, when you have someone like that in your community, you want to keep them, right? You know, I can't teach forever. I could not retire in this job. I would get too tired, too bored, or feel too stuck. But I had a lot of energy. So if someone is able to cultivate that kind of change in students, give them a voice. Give them a platform. Give them a way to share their experiences and insights and wisdom with everyone else. Please share my stories with other people. I'm not teaching in the classroom, but I have insights that will change the way you teach. I have insights that will save you years of anxiety. So use me. Use my pain. Use my suffering and use my knowledge. Use my knowledge to make your lives easier. And maybe you throw a little bit of money my way. Maybe you buy me a coffee or a burger, or maybe you subscribe to my Substack, or maybe you comment or like or click any buttons that need some clicking. Do what you got to do. So this is what I'm doing. I'm putting my stories into writing them and putting them into my podcast. I'm putting my stories into writing and putting them into my podcast. So you can see what I saw. And you can decide for yourself. All right? So, Storm Writers, this has been The Storm Writer. I hope you enjoyed riding the storm with me. And until the next storm, so long now.